Hey traders, this is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and it is Wednesday, March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day, or as I was saying, Happy St. Powell Day earlier. Haha. Yes, FOMC today. Basically Powell delivered. In terms of really not mentioning anything about tapering anytime soon, talking about how they, envision inflation and so on and so forth. So. Pretty similar, I think, to the speech that he gave for the Wall Street Journal. I think it was about a week and a half ago. Not too much of a mention regarding bonds, but and also not too much of a mention in terms of keeping or I should say, keeping a steady hand in terms of stimulus for now. So the markets reacted to that. We'll go over some of the moves, and no doubt, kind of an interesting day as these Fed days always are. But this was, a flip in the right direction, if you're bullish. We kind of stayed that way too. A lot of times we see with these Fed meetings, I will say the majority of the time what we see is, whipsaw price action, right? 2 o'clock, the announcement comes out, and we rocket higher, and we did start to pull back a little bit, and I was a little bit worried that we were going to see what we see a lot of the times, which is once Powell starts to speak and the Q&A starts going back and forth, sometimes we give back that move and actually go the other way. I've seen that a number of times before, so it's difficult to kind of go with the initial reaction because so many times it actually retraces and goes back the other way. But I think overall pretty decent. You could see on the bottom of my screen the breadth for the day, which was really ugly for most, until that FOMC started. You could see it flip to positive. We did kind of stall out there right around 3:15, 3:30 by the time Powell wrapped up with his testimony, but and the Q&A portion of the press conference. So it'll be interesting to see, if this kind of causes a change in some of the leadership from what we've been seeing recently, or if it's just more of the same. So I attempt to kind of help answer some of that. Some of these things we just need more time, right, to kind of see where things go. But let's talk before we talk about the sector breakdown and some individual movers for the day. Let's talk about what happened in bonds, and of course, risk disclaimer as well. That is in front of you. Everything that we're going through is for information purposes only, not giving out any recommendations or anything like that. This is strictly for education purposes only. And if the video is blurry, it's because YouTube takes forever to do their high def formatting. So you could just, if you see it's too blurry to read, close it and reopen it. Sometimes it takes a half hour, an hour for it to render high def. So let me give you as well the numbers for the day. The small caps came back from being worst to the day to finish best. They finished just under 1%, up about 80 basis points. They rallied 1.5% from the open. Right, because like I said, they did open a bit under pressure. The Qs were about the same in terms of how they rallied through the session, up 1.4% and up 40 basis points. And I'll tell you where those guys stalled out. And then everything else was basically fractional. The S&P was up 1/3%. TLT, we'll talk about that move too. Right, and we'll talk about the dollar. So let's get into some of that price action. All right, so let's start with the 30-year bond, which that was the initial reason for volatility this morning. The futures were very quiet in the overnight session, and once it got to be about 7 o'clock this morning, we started to kind of dive. Bonds started to dive lower again. And when that's happening, yields are going up. That creates a decent amount of pressure, especially on your higher multiple stocks. When I say higher multiples, I'm referring to valuations, particularly in the tech and growth area of the market. So we did finish off the lows. I am adjusting in my MarketWebs for contract changes. When you do that, I know there's some debate over whether or not you do that with futures, but and the MarketWebs, but this VPOC was taken out. So And we got a little bit of a reversal from it. However, still price is still down in the bonds, right? I also use moving averages. That helps tell me whether or not we're in a short-term downtrend, uptrend. And the reason why I use the 5-period moving average, this is 5-period exponential moving average, is because it really kind of tells me what that short-term trend is. And for now, price is below there. So, we can speculate on if we're going to get a bounce, but right now, I could tell you for 100%, we know that the trend is down right now in the bonds. So maybe this flips tomorrow. Maybe not. We'll kind of be watching for that. Why it's so important is because every time that these bonds rally a little bit, it gives a relief bounce to the Qs. Because of those concerns, and I think a lot of that is possibly computer driven, right? That algo driven, based on what bonds are doing. When yields go up, right, the Qs sell off, right? That's just the relationship that we have right now. Sometimes relationships last for a couple days, a couple weeks, sometimes longer. Right? I know people were looking at like the relationship between GameStop, for example, and overall stocks, right? So those relationships can exist for a little while, and then sooner or later they do dissipate. But right now, that's the environment that we're currently living in. So bonds, must watch. Some other things that happened, the dollar got a little bit weaker today. So that's one headwind that we don't have to worry about right for this moment, right? 2 weeks ago, we got a nice move up in the dollar, and that kind of fizzled. So it's important on Fed days like this, these macro type things, the dollar, bonds, they come to the forefront. Gold is another one. So gold managed to continue to bounce a little bit from the lows, up 70 basis points. Again, the weaker dollar helping that out. Bitcoin too. How could you forget Bitcoin, right? Well, we talked about how we had this reversal day in Bitcoin futures. We started the day higher. This was, I think, Monday, right? Everybody with their laser eyes or whatever was talking about how Bitcoin went up to 61,000, and they did a great job at, tweeting this every 2 minutes what Bitcoin was doing, and it actually reversed and went lower that day. So that's usually a pretty negative thing. However, price has been holding the uptrend, right? And that's something that we've been talking about in the Tribeca Trade Group trading room, is that, hey, while that was a nasty bar on Monday, we're still holding the trend. So 53,750 in Bitcoin futures is what I'm watching. And as long as that holds, I think for now it's just known as a little bit of digestion in an uptrend. ETH, so Ethereum, which is, again, gaining popularity. I hold more of Ethereum than I hold in Bitcoin in my little Coinbase account. I call it my little Coinbase account because it is a little account. I don't hold a lot of cryptos, but I do own some. And the level to watch here for Ethereum futures is 1917. Notice the consolidation here since this big bar, right? So again, this is not bad. Hopefully this resolves higher if you're bullish on the cryptocurrencies. Okay, so that was some of the main moves. And if we go back to the S&P here just for a minute, just to review levels, this continues. The S&P continues to look fine, right? There's some volatility intraday. Where it looks a little bit different is, when we go over to NASDAQ. And by the way, I want to just go over these 5-minute value areas, right? So we did manage to get above value for a little bit, right around 3 o'clock, but we actually stalled back inside. This gets even more evident when you look at the Qs, right? So the Qs had this nice rally, but they could not get outside of value for the day, right? They stalled right at the top of value. All right, so that's what the Qs picture looks like, and that's 323.67 level to watch for tomorrow. So we did break down a bit, in the last hour or the last 45 minutes, and you could see not doing too much here in the after hours market. If we go over to the daily chart, we're at a very interesting area at this point for the Qs, right? So we have broken into value. It looked quite ugly, I would say, this morning, because it looked like this was going to be a rejection, right? But as always, we always the closing print is the most important, and we managed to stay in value and right above the 50-day moving average. So that's not bad, right? So we'll just have to see if we get some continuation. I know a lot of people are kind of positioning this way. Is that going to be what kind of gets the momentum, or is it going to be some of the other things that we've continued to see? Right? I think that's kind of the big question. IWM also held the top of value, right? Don't forget, small caps had a huge week last week. So did the markets have a huge week last week. I know we get impatient with some of these things, but doing a little bit of digestion after a big week last week is not the worst thing in the world. Just have to have patience, which is one of the hardest things to do in trading is to be patient and wait for things to kind of materialize. One of the things that I mentioned too before I kind of get into some individual names is that when I was going through charts on Monday night, I realized that Monday was we had the nice rally at the end of the day, that things kind of looked like they were a little bit like short-term exhausted to the upside. I just was not finding a lot of single name setups. That happens from time to time. One of the things that I talked about earlier in the day was when you're seeing that, right? When you go through your charts and you're like, oh, geez, I'm not really seeing many setups. That doesn't mean that you should put the pedal to the metal in terms of putting on new risk. It means you should be patient and wait for those setups to materialize. All right. So IWM similarly was not able to get through value for the day, but didn't fall back quite as much as the Qs did at the end of the day. All right, so if we turn back and look at the sectors, right, so blockchain stocks did very well. One name that was very strong the other day was the Silvergate Capital. Notice that this thing, again, is having difficulty with the top of value for now. Another one that I like in this space is MSTR. That is holding the bottom of value, but SI is showing some relative strength in terms of that one. And the home builders, that was Lennar, huge day. I mean, when do you see Lennar up 13% on earnings? They did mention that they're going to be doing, I think, a spin-off, right? We tweeted that out earlier. So some pretty interesting stuff, right? Lennar spin-off plans. The market always loves spin-offs. Spin-off still show, but business solid. So huge day, up 13%, and that's a breakout. Lennar is one of my favorite names in the home builders group, and you could see the overall group up 3.8% and out to new highs. Very impressive, the home builders. So and if you go through the group, DHI was up 5%. So very, very strong. Toll Brothers is also almost out to that is a new closing high. So again, very, very strong. I was looking at this MWK, which again is not a home builder, but involved in the housing group. But man, home builders are super strong. We're going to review a couple names that reported earnings too, but it's just, isn't that crazy, right? To think like there's your market leader. There's some of your market leadership. The metals and mining, the materials group continues to be strong, right? XLB is right around, breaking out again. The industrials remain strong. They're near highs. Boeing looked great today. A lot of call activity in Boeing. I like this bar that Boeing put in. We spent some time talking about Boeing in the Q&A session today, which is 1 o'clock for those who are TTG members. We do Q&A session and chart review every Monday, Wednesday, and we also do a look ahead charts session, live on the mic. On Friday as well to kind of review some setups and so forth and what I'm seeing in the market. But Boeing looks pretty good. And one of the things that I think was important here, since we had this big move mostly last week, is to see the price kind of hang in here a little bit. Right? That's a very good sign, holding this 5-period moving average. So one of the things, we didn't know how this was going to develop towards the end of the day because, the candle was only about here. But this is strong, right? And I think Boeing is one of those names to buy in the dip right now. So you could see this close right around the top of value for the day. So dips are being bought in these things, industrials, right? We've talked about this before. GM is another one of those names too, up 5%. So, we don't know how long these trends are going to last, but right now they are trends, right? And GM continues to be very strong. This Deere is just unbelievable at this point. Just amazing. And Caterpillar. But Deere's doing a little bit, oops, wrong chart. I mean, look at Deere and Caterpillar. Just no let up at all in these names, right? So I know everyone's attention seems to be on Pinterest and on Snap and on software and so forth. But, I would love for that group to get going again. But right now it's just not exhibiting really, the same strength. And we went over some charts earlier. So I would say with this group, right? And again, I'm not giving any advice, but what I'm doing is just being very patient. Right, we went over this TTD example earlier. Right, what do you notice about this chart from a technical standpoint? Right, well, there's a couple of things to me that jumps off the page. So number one, here's where the high was made, all the way back at the end of December. Since then, what do you notice from there? Well, every time the trade desk tries to rally, it's making a lower high. Right, so that's the one thing that jumps off the page to me. So lower high here, it bounced again. Did not take out this high. It bounced again this week, and so far has not been able to take out any of this, right? So, and you could see this 50-day moving average, and I'll try to highlight that a little bit, acting as a barrier now, right? So this failed back in here, and it seems to be having some difficulty now. 808 is the level, but I'm not picking on the trade desk, but I see this pattern over and over in many of kind of the high growth software areas of the market. So to me, what does this mean? Well, unless you're playing something like the 200-day moving average, if you're looking at these things now, right, I think you still need confirmation. I like to see a close above the 50-day moving average, right? We just haven't had that in a while. So patience and being highly selective in growth, I think makes sense right now, right? I mentioned Pinterest because I seem to get questions on Pinterest almost every day. Pinterest made some progress today, right at the 50-day moving average, but still, I think just a harder name, right? Do you see how easy these names are going up right now, versus the others? So, I try to kind of stay positioned in that and look for things if they are going to change and rotate. I got long some DuPont. I've talked about this name a couple times. I was on Bloomberg actually talking about the trade last week, and I actually pulled the trigger and put the trade on today, and I'm looking for that 80-40 VPOC. So probably short-term swing trade. Micron is another name that continues to see call buying. Did get above value. Did come out of this consolidation the right way. And maybe these semis can start to move a little bit. I like the green candle out of here. My one concern, of course, using the value areas is that, well, this is just for today, but had a little bit of difficulty with the top of value there too. But would really like to see the semiconductors get going a bit. Taiwan Semi is one name that again, looks a little bit troubled here, but hopefully this kind of resolves itself. But you could see also below the 50-day moving average, below the 20-day moving average, but just not sure why this name is not acting very well. But a lot of call action in the name. And Applied Materials, which is a name that I sold the other day, trying to resolve higher as well. Skyworks is another name that I'm watching that is also looks to be a little bit healthier than the rest of the group. All right, so that's a couple things. Some names that reported earnings, just pretty amazing. This Williams-Sonoma, right? I mean, look at this thing go. It's up to 156. Some of the best growth and sales numbers I think I've ever seen. So it's really wild, to see some of these names report comparable sales 25%. Really strong. And I guess they're Pottery. I didn't know they were Pottery Barn. Pottery Barn really strong too. One name I have my eye, a couple of names I have my eye on with like in the group. I like this TJX. Again, the chart is a little bit difficult. It's kind of gone sideways for a while, but I don't know. They've got brands like Home Goods, Home Sense. I think Ross Stores also looks interesting here. I mentioned the department stores the other day. Five, really nice chart, by the way. I did not play this name for earnings, but you can see this thing's also out quite nicely. So this could be a name to watch for tomorrow because you look at this five below, right, and maybe this thing could really start to kind of break out because this has been some nice consolidation. So that's a name to watch for tomorrow. So those are just a couple things, but overall, bring up the trades channel because I always show the trades channel every day. McDonald's worked for me. I took my last McNugget of a trade here, exit. But this worked pretty well. I got out of it right on the open today, which I think that's where, yeah, I got out right on the open and it kind of closed that way. So that's fine. I'm happy with the gains in this one. 650 paid 360. JP Morgan, I got a target. I added some yesterday. I decided to bail on the rest of the trade. I don't know. I may have made a mistake, but we'll see. It's just been kind of going a little bit too slow for an option trade, so I decided to make a judgment call and get out of that one. Micron, I did not stick in, unfortunately. That's sometimes just the way it's been working for me. Right? Sometimes if I feel like, hey, stay disciplined, and then the stock rallies. Disney worked very well. They made an announcement about reopening. The stock really didn't get going too much, but I bought the dip yesterday in it, and I got rewarded for that. So I left the last piece of the trade on. So from yesterday's ad, all in all, pretty good. Would have liked to see it have a little bit more momentum to it, but that's okay. So yeah, and I'm looking for things. We've been seeing a lot of call buying in Microsoft. I think Microsoft is in value. Again, it just doesn't seem to be really pushing hard to the upside. But I went out a little bit further and in some June 40 calls. ON, which I had calls in yesterday, so this is a semiconductor, and I switched to, I made some money in the options, and I switched from the options to the stock, and took my first target in the stock today. And then I took a small flyer on some Qs calls, just because of, I think if interest rates, if bonds do bounce and interest rates come in, go down a little bit, I think there's good risk to reward there, and that's how I'm playing it. And then we'll continue to kind of look for so to have something on in case that happens, and then we'll just kind of continue to play names that have relative strength. For now. So that's the plan for tomorrow. All in all, just again another one of these things to kind of get out of the way. FOMC days are very tricky. You never know whether or not you should be taking profits into the strength, or if you should be putting on a little bit of some trades as confirmation when you see that. They're always tricky days, so don't worry about that. If you feel like you missed something, or if you did make some money on it, congratulations to you. There was some decent movers off of the meetings today, but all in all, I try to stay light into these Fed meetings because they are very whippy. So we'll see how things kind of shake out. And once we get through, we got 2 more days until option expiration and index rebalancing. And then I think hopefully if we get through this week, things may get a little bit easier, in terms of event-wise and price action not being as whippy as it's been lately. All right, guys, have a great night, and I'll see you tomorrow.